Konami once again strikes with its overwhelming over-obsession with the original Duel Monsters in the set of Maze of Memories, where Gate Guardian has finally received support and has been turned into an archetype, a thing that no one asked for, yet we still somehow have it. And it is my duty to review it and see how much it sucks. Well, how much it could suck potentially, but because there is a good chance also that it doesn't suck, but you know the drill by now. They were used, the pieces and the Gate Guardian himself was used by the Labyrinth brothers in both the original Duel Monsters and in their one-time appearance in GX. Well, both of their appearances throughout GX and Duel Monsters were one time, one per each show. And yeah, what else do I say? It was for the longest time a level 11 brick with no effects and only served the purpose of being equipped to the Zubaba General to get it to the highest possible attack value, because Gate Guardian was the warrior type monster was the main deck warrior type monster with the highest amount of attack in the game, and I think he actually still is, but I should do some background checks. But anyway, we have lots of retrains and questionable additions to the archetype because lore and stuff. Anyway, let us start off this archetype analysis proper and talk about the first three members of the archetype: Sangha of the Thunder, Kazejin, and Suijin. They are all level 7 monsters, light, wind, and water respectively, and each have, well, Sangha and Kazejin have 2200 defense, with Sangha having 2600 attack, Kazejin having 2400 attack, and then Suijin that has 2400 defense and 2500 attack. And I'm talking about all three of them at once because they have the exact same effect, which is that once while any of them are face up on the field, during damage calculation in your opponent's turn, if this card is being attacked, quick effect, you can target the attacking monster and make that target's attack 0 during the damage calculation only. Yes, this is okay-ish for like the meta of 2012 to 2015, and it was even these effects that kind of somewhat enabled these guys to see a resurgence, well, surgence, since they haven't been seeing competitive play before at all in some pendulum decks due to the pieces being level 7 and due to giving you access to rank 7 pools since you can use them as material once they've used up their effects. But other than that, they really didn't serve to much purpose, and neither did their ultimate combined form, the Gate Guardian, which was the level 11 warrior, as opposed to each of them. Yeah, all of them are different types. Sangha is of course Thunder, Kazejin is a spellcaster for some reason, and Suijin is an Aqua, which kind of makes sense. But anyway, yeah, Gate Guardian is a level 11 warrior with 3750 attack. Why the hell does it need to be so specific? I'm not sure. And 3400 defense, and he can only be special summoned by tributing all of the above pieces and has no additional effect. So yeah, like I said, the only reason why people even remotely considered running this card was to use it as an equip for Zubaba General to get it over 5000 attack. So yeah, nothing much else to say, other than he of course received a retrain in this recent batch of archetypal support. None of the pieces are received retrains, which is very, very odd to me, considering, well, yeah, they are okay. They have okay-ish effects even for today, even though they are battle-related effects have heavily fallen out of favor nowadays, so yeah. But anyway, we'll get to the retrain soon enough. First up, we have a whole gutter trash of completely random shit to skim through before we actually get to the good stuff. The first one being Giga Tech Wolf, which is a level 4 vanilla with crap stats, and I'm assuming you are probably thinking to yourself, what is this thing doing here? well, everything will become clear much very soon. And then we have the last vanilla in this batch, that being Labyrinth Wall, a level 5 with 0 attack and 3000 defense, and is actually quite important in the archetype. At least he would be important if it wasn't for the fact that he got a retrain, which is kind of bug nuts for how they handled the retrain. But anyway, you don't need to run this, unlike, and then the same goes of course for Giga Tech Wolf. And then we have our first effect monster, Jirai Gumo, insect with 2200 attack, which is actually quite alright for a level 4 with that kind of attack value, and 100 defense. And its only effect is that when it declares an attack, you can toss a coin, and if you call it wrong, you lose half your life points. And yes, this is pretty much the standard, because this was the time when level 4 monsters with 2000 or more attack had to be dictatorship level oppressed in order to see any kind of utility, because they were so scarily powerful that they weren't allowed to have any good effects. Instead, they had to have negative effects. And yeah, Jirai Gumo again has nothing directly to do with this new set of cards, but he also received a very bug nuts retrain, which makes him important to the archetype to at least mention him. So yeah. Next up we have Cannon Soldier, again something that has absolutely no reason to be affiliated with this archetype, but it somehow is. And I probably don't have to tell you this, but this is a level 4 machine with 1400 attack and 1300 defense, which allows you to tribute a monster to inflict 500 damage to your opponent. What else can I say? It's an OTK and FTK enabler. Yeah, you build your entire deck around it, and yeah, it falls into the archetype for a very bizarre reason, which I will get into later. But before that, we also have Cannon Soldier Mark II, which requires 2 monsters for tribute, but instead deals 1500 damage to your opponent, which of course is very beefy, but he hardly is able to compete with the original due to the high tribute cost you need in order to get this effect off. And our last level 5, well, our last original level 5 is Shadow Ghoul, a zombie with 1600 attack and 1300 defense, and he gains 100 attack for each monster in your graveyard. Nah, it's a very... well, you can technically build your deck around this, and because zombies like being in the graveyard, this can technically get on a good day to a very prominent attack value, but setting this up is highly unremarkable and very specific, so I would not recommend it. And he also received a retrain, but this one is a bit more traditional. Shadow Ghoul of the Labyrinth is actually our first archetypal recent card that we're taking a look at, with the same stats as the original Shadow Ghoul. And you can discard this card to add 1 Labyrinth Wall card from your deck to your hand. At the start of the damage step, if your opponent's monster attacks while you control a Labyrinth Wall card, you can banish this card from your graveyard, destroy that opponent's monster. You can only use each effect of Shadow Ghoul of the Labyrinth once per turn. Okay, so on a first glance, we're not off to a great start when it comes to the playstyle of this new Gate Guardian support and archetype. Because, I mean, yeah, it's non-targeting destruction, but protecting stuff from battle is... it couldn't be more outdated if it thrived. Yeah, sure, it's a decent form of protection, like, to keep on the side, but card effect destruction is what is the primary concern in today's meta. And if you're thinking you have to control the original Labyrinth Wall in order to apply this effect, well, this segment of the video would be spoken in a completely, astronomically different tone if that was the case, but that is not the case, as we'll see later on. And yeah, so far Shadow Ghoul of the Labyrinth is kind of okay because of that search effect being its only redeeming quality, so I guess you can run 2 or 3 of these, because the card that it searches, which includes the OG Labyrinth Wall, if you can believe it, is actually quite good. So yeah, run 2 or 3 of these, so yeah. But if those two ghouls are boring to you, you can always use the equip spell Magical Labyrinth, which you can only equip to Labyrinth Wall, which you can then tribute while it's equipped with this in order to special summon Wall Shadow from your deck. And Wall Shadow is a level 7 with 1600 attack and 3000 defense, and it can only be special summoned by the effect of Magical Labyrinth and has no other effects. And yeah, just ignore this one. You're better off, you'll be better off for it. Alright, next up we have to take a slight dip into the extra deck to talk about the next retrain, and that is Labyrinth Tank, which is another level 7 Dark Fusion and requires Giga Tech Wolf and Cannon Soldier as fusion material and has no effect. And yeah, this is how the two actually fall into the archetype, and how this falls into the archetype, because you know, it also received a main deck retrain, if you can believe it, that being Labyrinth Heavy Tank. Same stats as the original, and you can normal summon this card without tributing. Cannot attack on the turn it is normal summoned, and during your main phase you can place one of your Sangha of the Thunder, Kazejin or Suijin that is banished or in your hand or deck face up in your spell and trap zone as a continuous spell. Then, if you control a Labyrinth Wall card, you can destroy one monster your opponent controls. You can only use this effect of Labyrinth Heavy Tank once per turn. Now, this is actually a good card. 3 of staple, and as you can see, we're getting some very major Crystal Beast and Artifact vibes here as he places the original Gate Guardian pieces into the spell and trap zone, and that is because we get our finally we get our first proper glimpse in what this new batch of cards is based around, and that is using the Gate Guardian pieces from anywhere on the field as material for the original Gate Guardian and the new retrains we will talk about very soon. And when it comes to promoting that playstyle, Labyrinth Heavy Tank does a very good job, as he also does offer some non-targeting destruction removal, which is also very good. So obviously you run 3 of these at all times. And that is it for the main deck lineup, and now we move on to the extra deck, and as we can see, we have the Gate Guardian fusions have been made in the same vein as XYZ Dragon Cannon, as in that we have the combined piece of all 3 of them, and also the 2-piece fusions. And the 2-piece fusions are level 9, so we will talk about them first, while the final combined form is a level 12. So first up we have Gate Guardian of Thunder and Wind, and requires Sangha of the Thunder and Kazejin obviously, and must be special summoned from your extra deck by banishing the above cards you control, and during your main phase you can add one spell or trap from your deck to your hand that mentions Sangha, Kazejin and Suijin, all 3 of them, and you can only use this effect once per turn. And if this face-up special summoned card in its owner's control leaves the field because of an opponent's card, you can special summon one of your banished Sangha of the Thunder or Kazejin. Okay, so I am very quick to say that this, out of all of the 2-piece fusion, is the worst one, because it's, well, the floating effect is shared between all the 2-piece fusions, as you can float into one of their materials, and yeah, it's pretty good when it comes to that part. And the summoning condition is also shared, which is really good as well, because you can also use stuff from your spell and trap zone, like Labyrinth Heavy Tank implies. And in that case, the 2-piece fusions and the final combined fusion is even better in that regard, and they're awesome. But the unique effect of Thunder and Wind is pretty lackluster when it comes to the comparing them to the rest of them, because it searches back row, of which he only has 4 targets to pick, and 2 of them are actually remotely good. One of them is the field spell, which you can also search with terraforming, and it also is searchable with the retrained Shadow Ghoul, so he essentially only has 1 good card which he can search, making him pretty lackluster. But yeah, giving you the option is at least nice, so you can always consider running one of these if you have room for it in your extra deck. So yeah, next up we have the slightly better Gate Guardian of Water and Thunder, which is a fusion of Sangha and Suijin. And yeah, it has the same summoning condition and floating effect. And it also has, and its unique effect is that once per chain, you can target one, on a quick effect, you can target one face-up monster your opponent control and change its attack to 0 until the end of the turn. And you can use this effect twice per turn. So this is essentially the exact same effect as the original pieces have, it. Except this one is a slight upgrade, as you can trigger it whenever instead of needing to wait for the opponent in order to attack you in order to trigger it. It only lasts until the end of the turn in return, and you can also use it twice, which is again very good, and it's also a once per chain. So yeah, it's not better by much, but it's still a massive improvement over the original pieces and over the first two-piece fusion. And our last two-piece fusion is Gate Guardian of Wind and Water, which is Suijin and Kazejin, and this one is the best out of the bunch because its unique effect is that once per chain, when your opponent activates a spell or trap card or effect on the field, on a quick effect, you can negate that effect, and you can only use this twice per turn. So yeah, Effect Negator is a very good thing to have, and again, out of the two-piece fusions, this one is clearly the best, as, I mean, it is somewhat limiting when you read how the effect is actually applied, but once you learn with what you can work with, it becomes pure gold, and you can actually do some pretty decent disruption, and this is the one that you will prioritize summoning most of the time, as you will constantly be putting onto the field Suijin first, Kazejin next, and Sangha last, because of the hierarchy of the fusions that you would want to use. But we also have the fusion of all three of them, to some fans, the very long and eagerly awaited retrain of Gate Guardian, that being Gate Guardians Combined, which is a level 12 with the same stats as the original Gate Guardian, requires all three of them as material, obviously, and must be special summoned from your extra deck by banishing the above cards from your hand, field, and or graveyard. And when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a card you control, quick effect, you can negate that effect, and if you do, destroy that card, and you can only use this effect thrice per turn. So this is the second card in the entire game that you can only use its effect thrice per turn. And its floating effect is a bit different, as instead of floating into one of the pieces, it floats into the original Gate Guardian, ignoring its summoning conditions. And honestly, I'm a bit on the fence with this one, because I would have much preferred it if it floated into, for example, two pieces of Gate Guardian to be an upgrade over the two-piece fusion, so you can immediately go into a two-piece fusion if this one gets removed by some miracle or reason. And yeah, or if it actually gave you a choice to be able to either summon two of the pieces or the original Gate Guardian. Don't get me wrong, the floating effect, being able to float into a 3750 beat stick is actually really good, except the fact is that that 3750 beat stick is horrible brick, which hasn't got any additional effects besides being that said beat stick. So yeah, that's why I'm kind of on the fence. And then the actual negation effect, it only negates stuff which targets, which is kind of an oversight in terms of development here, because most of the stuff in nowadays tends to use most of the top decks and meta decks in the current competitive scene use stuff which does not target or offers other kinds of removal. So while it is impressive that Gate Guardians Combined can use this thrice per turn, like, I imagine they did not want to make a thrice per turn Quasar, because that would be simply ridiculous with how somewhat easy this thing can hit the field. But I'm not quite sure that the good compromise has been made. Don't get me wrong, it's still a great effect, but it can somewhat be limiting when you consider that that against most situations it has a 50% chance to do nothing because of the game's current environment of top decks and meta decks. So yeah, it's a great boss monster, but I would not prioritize building your entire deck around it to summon it all the time, because I feel like the two-piece fusion of wind and water can sometimes get the job done much better. If you actually somewhat manage to get both this and the two-piece fusion of Kazejin and Suijin, I think that would be a very formidable board to get through. If you could somewhat get that get your board into that state along with some other negation, I think you might be getting yourself a very formidable board here. But as it is now, it's far from the worst thing to consider. It's definitely a massive improvement over the original Gate Guardian, but there is some nicks and knacks to work out here before we can call this boss monster a fantastic one. It still needs some working and some new support to be considered prevalent and worth considering. But anyway, that is it for the monster lineup. Now we move on to the spell and traps, first of which we have the field spell retrain of Labyrinth Wall, that being Labyrinth Wall Shadow. Monsters cannot attack on the turn they are summoned, except monsters whose original level is 5 or higher. Once per turn during your main phase, you can place one of your Sangha of the Thunder, Kazejin or Suijin that is banished or in your hand or deck face up in your spell and trap zone as a continuous spell. At the start of your opponent's battle phase, you can target a monster your opponent controls with less than 1600 attack and destroy it. Okay, so always run 3 of these at all times. Never, you should run 5 if you can, which of course you can't, but you know what I'm getting at. Okay, so this is a pretty interesting floodgate for attacking, which is relevant sometimes and sometimes not, because again we have Link and Xyz monsters to work with here, but the second effect to once per turn place a Gate Guardian piece in the spell and trap zone is immensely important, because it's the bread and butter of the Gate Guardian playstyle, and the fact that the retrained Shadow Ghoul can search it is an immense plus as well. But I really want to dwell on the fact that this is essentially a retrain of Labyrinth Wall, and really, you know your archetype is bad when you have to retrain a monster as a spell or trap card in order to make it work. And this is, by the way, not the last time we'll be seeing something like this. And then we have the last effect, which is so goddamn specific that it will literally never go off. And again, it's non-targeting destruction, which is kind of impressive for a Gate Guardian archetype, if I am being honest. So yeah, it won't go off too often, but at least it gives you a choice. Run 3 at all times, along with a terraforming and 2 or 3 retrains of Shadow Ghoul. Next up we have double attack Wind and Thunder. If you control a Gate Guardian monster, target one card on the field, destroy it. And during your main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard, add one of your Sangha of the Thunder, Kazejin or Suijin that is banished or in your deck to your hand. And you can only use this effect once per turn. I get the idea, it's a quick play, target and destroy a card on the field, but it's locked behind the Gate Guardian monsters, meaning that you either have to control a 2-piece fusion or the retrain or the original Gate Guardian, making this a lot more specific than it could have possibly been. I would have much more preferred an archetypal fusion spell to further help with getting the 2 pieces and the combined form onto the field, but I guess it doesn't hurt to run one, since you know, the 2-piece between Wind and Thunder can search it. So yeah, I mean, run 1 if you feel like it. Next up we have Riryoku. Yeah, a bit of a tongue twisting there. And again, it's a very old card, a spell card which allows you to target 2 face-up monsters on the field, halve the attack of one monster, and if you do, add the lost attack to the other monster, and these effects last until the end of the turn. It's a spell card for 1 turn only effect of Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon, and the reason why I'm showing this is because this card also received a retrain which ties it to the archetype, that being Riryoku Guardian. If your life points are lower than your opponent's, target one monster you control with Gate Guardian in its original name, halve your opponent's life points, then that monster gains attack equal to your opponent's life points. You can banish this card from your graveyard. Yeah, the floating effect to add a Gate Guardian piece is the exact same across the entire back row lineup with the exception of the field spell, so I'll stop elaborating it. So yeah, this is again the other card of the 4 cards which the 2-piece fusion of Sangha and Kazejin can search. And as you can probably tell, it's very bad because, again, it requires your life points to be lower than your opponent's. Okay, yeah, sure, you can use Upstart Goblin or something that halves your life points in order to meet the activation condition of this, but the only purpose of this is to increase attack of the fusion monsters or the OG Gate Guardian if you have somehow have it on your field. And that's literally all it does. You usually, if you run this, you usually run it for the floating effect in order to dump it to the graveyard with Foolish Burial Goods in order to search out the Gate Guardian pieces and nothing else. And that was the last spell card, and the last card and the first continuous trap card is Prey of the Jirai Gumo, the trap card retrain of Jirai Gumo, which allows you to special summon this card as a normal monster of Insect Earth level 5 and has 100 less attack than Jirai Gumo and is 1 level higher to your main monster zone and in the same column. And this is still a trap card. Then you can destroy one monster your opponent controls that is in this card's column. And it has the same folding effect as the Riryoku Retrain and the double attack Wind and Thunder. Okay, so this is actually a pretty scary piece of removal, as this is a trap monster which non-target destroys a monster in the same column as the one where it was placed when it was placed face down. I would have loved this thing if it had the same activation condition as Infinite Impermanence, because, for example, if you control no cards or if you have maybe a Gate Guardian piece in your spell and trap zone that you can basically activate this from your hand in order to apply this effect, it would make this kind of thing a very potent piece of removal, which it is still, but not on the level it could have been. Yeah, this is a very good card, and you obviously run 2 or 3 of these due to it having that useful floating effect as well, and due to the fact that it's also searchable. So yeah. Anyway, that does it for the Gate Guardian archetype. And oh boy, this grading scale is going to be very tricky since, again, aside from the Fusion Valentine's Day special, I haven't graded an archetype in a very, very long time, so here we go. In terms of consistency, well, their only consistency boosters are Gate Guardian of Thunder and Wind, which is a 2-piece fusion monster, and again, the pool of that is very, very low. Shadow Ghoul of the Labyrinth only searches the field spell, and the other stuff is really not unsearchable. The Gate Guardian pieces can be placed into the spell and trap zone with the Retrain of Labyrinth tank. Again, it's very, very slow for something of this day and age, but it's not. And the field spell can also put them in the spell and trap zone. Again, it's very slow, but you see, it kind of doesn't take much to get a single 2-piece fusion onto the field, so I'm struggling between a 1 out of 3 and 2 out of 3, but I will take other modern options into consideration, and the fact that, yeah, I mean, they can use Allure of Darkness for the Shadow Ghoul stuff to get some decent draw power, but again, not every piece of this archetype's main deck monster lineup is a dark monster, so you can run into potential problems. So I'm sorry, but this will still have to be 1 out of 3, even after this archetype trying its damn best to actually come out on top as playable after years of radio silence, after not having anything in terms of support. In terms of power values are relatively high across the board, and if you can somehow manage to pull off Ryoku Guardian's effects on a consistent basis, it can be pretty formidable, so I'll give them a 2 out of 3 for at least trying. Comeback ability is something I was considering giving a 2 out of 3 due to the fact how easily you can make certain 2-piece fusions. But the fact of the matter is, once you get locked out of summoning high-level monsters, you're basically done for, and Prey of the Jiraigumo cannot save you all the time, so I'll give them a 1 out of 3 as well. In terms of protection, well, they basically lack any sort of protection, I will give them that. The only form of protection they might have is from battle with Shadow Ghoul of the Labyrinth's graveyard effect. But then again, we're talking about a single monster here, and of course we have the 2-piece fusions effect where to negate stuff, and the 3-piece fusion which can also negate stuff. But I would not really consider that as protection rather than versatility. So yeah, in terms of protection, I will give them a 1 out of 3. But in terms of versatility, I will give them a generous 2 out of 3 because they have access to rank 7 monsters due to having lots of level 7s all across the board. The 2-piece Kazugen and Suigen fusion is actually really good. The 3-piece fusion is decent, not the best, but it is pretty decent. And it floats into another very chunky beat stick upon it dying. And Prey of the Jiraigumo is actually a very formidable piece of removal, which can evolve to be a very good way to generate field presence in the process. So yeah, I will be giving them, like I said, a very generous 2 out of 3 in terms of versatility. And that is the Gate Guardian archetype. I am honestly quite surprised that I actually made this into an archetype, because no one asked for this ever, and yeah, we have it, and I was fully expecting them to like get to printing some of the Reigns archetypes like we haven't seen before, at the moment, like the Armatos Legio, the Storm Riders, or even the drones. But nope, here comes the Gate Guardian out of nowhere. But anyway, yeah, that is it for the video. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more Reds Bookers and updates. Have yourselves a great day, and I'll see you next time.